I'm Julie Saunders.
I'm Jan Wilson. Julie and I both have experience as school librarians, and we've worked together as district library leaders.
In each episode, we'll dive into our profession with interviews and meaningful content to inspire you. We're not experts,
but we're pretty close.
The ideas and opinions shared by any host, guest, or listener are their own and do not represent those of any respective school district.
Welcome to Library Exchange. This episode is sponsored by Mackin. For over 40 years, Mackin has provided pre-K through 12th grade libraries and classrooms with access to over 4 million printed and digital, fiction and nonfiction titles.
The 24-time multi-award-winning digital content management system Mackin Via, along with divisions Mackin Library, Mackin Classroom, Mackin Maker, Mackin Learning, and the brand new whole school resource management system Mackin Vision, help to create a truly unique and robust educational resource company that schools and educators have relied on year after year.
For more information, visit mackin.com today.
Nice shirt, Jan.
Thanks. For those of you not watching us on YouTube, my t-shirt is a lovely shade of plum and says, "I'm a school librarian." Well, technically, the color is heather maroon. But Julie, I could say the same to you. What does your shirt say?
It says, "If it involves reading in pajamas, count me in."
And are you wearing pajama bottoms with that shirt?
Well, that's for me to know and you to never find out.
Hey, Julie, look, I got you covered.
That's great.
I have on pajama bottoms, everyone.
Awesome. Well, we posted about our store on Instagram a couple of weeks ago. Our Etsy store is Library Exchange at .etsy.com. Pick up some merchandise.
Okay, so enough about our wardrobe. Let's introduce our guests. This is our first episode, Julie, with 2 guests. So this is going to be difficult for me, but everyone's names are different. But both are employed by the Gwinnett County Public Library System in Georgia.
Yes, Jenny LaJeunesse is the Technical Services Manager, and Alex Olson is the Staff Engagement Specialist.
So first, welcome to both of you, Jenny and Alex. And before we get started into our questions, if both of you could just explain your job title to us, what do you do at the public library? If we can start with Jenny.
Sure. I'm the Technical Services Manager, which means I manage a department of 10 people, and we handle all of the collection development, purchasing, receiving, cataloging, and processing of our physical materials. We also select and make accessible our electronic materials.
Thank you. Alex, your turn. Tell us a little bit about your job as a Staff Engagement Specialist.
Yeah, I work with one other person to train all of our new staff who get hired to work at the library, as well as just keep staff up to date on any new database changes, new technologies that we're getting, also just test driving new things that the library might be interested in that we might need, some staff buy-in and interest later on. So really just working on, keeping staff educated and up to date on everything the library is doing.
I love library jobs. So before we get started on our topic of findability, Jenny, how many total branches does the Gwinnett County Public Library have, and how many people do you serve?
We have 15 branches. That's 15 branches. And we serve a population of 1 million people here in Gwinnett County.
Okay,
Great.
My eyes just got big. Again, for those people who are not watching us on YouTube.
So in the last few years, the public library has revamped the nonfiction sections of each of your branches. So I'll ask this question to Alex. What term do you use to describe this reorganization, and why do you call it this?
So we use the term findability, which is sort of encompasses the entire project. And we call it this because we really wanted to focus on customers being able to find our stuff. The Dewey Decimal System is not always readily recognizable for everyone. We get people who come from no library background, customers who come from libraries in other countries who might not use Dewey. And we wanted something that was more recognizable for everyone, very findable, customizable for us so that we could make changes to adapt to our community. But most importantly, something that was customer-centric, because they're the ones coming in and looking for books. We wanted something that was meaningful and easy for them to use.
So you've kind of just explained your initial reasons for exploring this idea. So how did you hear about this? Were there other public libraries doing this? What was the inspiration for your public library?
I think that the idea started with our kind of new librarians group. It's called Leadership Academy here at GCPL. And one of the participants in that group wrote a white paper on using a word-based classification system, sort of like BISAC which is used in bookstores. And it caught on from there. Josh, you know who you are. Thank you. That was kind of the first influence.
So as you were looking around, were there any other public library systems that were implementing this type of model?
Yes, we visited Richland County Library in South Carolina because they had gone to BISAC classification and they had it on their spine labels and their shelving. We went there, we visited with them. We found out how they did it, and we decided how we wanted to do it to suit our library system.
Can you describe the findability model just a little bit, how it's similar or different from the Dewey Decimal System and the importance of signage?
I can talk about how it's different from Dewey, but I'm going to let Alex talk about the signage because she was very hands-on in that process. So some of the ways that it's different from Dewey, well, to me, a big benefit of a word-based classification system like Findability is that you know exactly the section you're looking at when you walk up to the shelf. Not only are there big signs at the top of the shelf, but the spine labels match those signs. So if you don't know that the cookbooks are in the 600s, that's okay because they say cooking on them. And as you walk down the shelf, you go from just general cooking to cooking barbecue, cooking beverages. And then we get into world cooking, and we subdivided our world cooking books by nationality just based on what we had a lot of. So as you go through there, you can find more exactly what you're looking for by browsing. And that was something that we just didn't really have with our Dewey classification, because some of those Dewey numbers, y'all know this, can get really long and wrap around the book and you don't know what's at the end of the number. And so it just wasn't really working for us. But if we group these together in a logical way that we think our customers want to use to find them, then that works better for us. So what we have is not exactly BISAC, but we started with BISAC and pared it down.
I would imagine, Jenny, that you organized it in a logical way, but that logical way probably had a lot of different opinions. So how in the world do you come up with narrow it down to major categories that everyone can agree on?
We didn't agree.
Not at all.
And you're still not agreeing. No, maybe now you're agreeing.
Well, okay. Here's another benefit of kind of using our own homegrown, home-developed system is that we're really nimble. If we go to the shelf and we realize that a lot of our kids' nonfiction books are about music instead of art, okay, well, let's just create a section for music. We have enough books to fill that up. That's not one that we did. That's just a hypothetical. Or if we go to the shelf and we go to the health section and we see that there are only just a few books about heart health, then we might just file those back in with the general health books and eliminate that as a subsection. But we didn't have to do that by going to our Dewey Decimal books and tipping in pages or anything like that, or deal with any changes in the cataloging community. We could just catalog it for how we think our customers want to find it.
Right. Alex, that leads me into the signage piece because, again, this is a word-based classification system. So how do you start with signage for that? Is that after you have your topics? Can you speak to that for us?
Yeah. Well, we definitely saved signage till the end because we spent a good number of months talking, debating, downright arguing over what some of the headings would be. And this was on a big team. This was not just Jenny and I. We probably had, I would say, although Jenny and I argued a lot too, but there was there was, I think, about 10 or 12 of us on the initial team. We waited till the end once we kind of knew what all of our headings were going to be. And then from there, we really wanted to focus on signage, one, because every one of our 15 branches was doing their signs in a completely different way. So we wanted something more consistent. That was goal number one. But two, we wanted it to be really easy for customers when they walked in, because we know change is hard. It's difficult. Anytime you move books around in the library, people get upset about that. And so we wanted to make it really, really simple for them to find what they were looking for. So we worked with another company to help us design several layers of signs. We had our large signs at the top of the bookshelves themselves that you could see from a far distance away. That would kind of help guide you. Oh, okay, there's, the romance books, there's the cooking books, that kind of thing. And then we had signage on the end caps that went into a little more detail of everything on each individual aisle, because some of our sections are a little small and we didn't want signs everywhere. So some of the smaller sections don't have like a big over the shelf sign, but they are listed on the end cap. So once you're close enough, you can see it on the end cap. Something that was completely new for our system was we did sort of divider signs to go in between the books on the shelf. So as you walked down the aisle, you could see, oh, biography starts here, business starts here. And that even included our subheadings so that people could really find what they were looking for. We also color coded everything using 3 different colors. So all of our adult collections were all blue signage. Our teen and sort of young adult collections were all green signage, and everything in kids was all red signage to kind of give another visual cue that, these are where all the kids' books are. These are where all the adult books are.
Was there any change to the spine label of the book?
Yes. Every nonfiction book in our collection got relabeled. Absolutely.
And so is there any evidence of Dewey in your model? Is there any evidence of Dewey on the actual book?
No.
So I would imagine there's school librarians and public librarians probably listening to this podcast episode, and they're wondering, the signage is more visual. It's something that you can wrap your brain around. How about the catalog and what you actually have to do electronically to actually help your browsers that are on the catalog find the information they're looking for?
Okay, so this is my favorite thing to talk about. Warning.
It really is.
Okay, so the way we relabeled everything started with item record modification. And I think that in some systems, and especially school systems, I'm referring to your copy records. We call them item records. And we're talking about the item records that have your barcode and your call number that's reflected on your spine label. And those are attached, of course, to our bib records. That's how we refer to them. I think you call them title records. Same thing. The thing with the ISBN, the title and other. So we started with catalog call number browses in our system, and we just grouped together by Dewey decade. So we had all of the 110s, the 120s, the 130s together so that we could at least start with something that was within the same discipline, because that's how Dewey works, of course. And then we wanted to kind of translate that. We knew it wouldn't be a one-to-one translation to a findability heading, but it was at least a good starting place because it was a classification, and take those Dewey decade by Dewey decade and still look at them title by title. But we knew, all right, I'm looking at the 610s. So a lot of this is going to go into the health section. And then we just looked at each title in the catalog, and it was pretty grueling, but also we sort of love it. So title by title, we could figure out, yep, that looks like a health title. That's a health/nutrition. That's a health/fitness. That's just general health, and we were able to subdivide from there. And it got pretty hairy in some of the sections, because you might know that in a public library that serves adults of all ages, the health section is pretty big. like a lot of our sections. And so we divided them out and made batch item record changes to those. And we just changed the 6-1, whatever the Dewey number was in the classification field of the item record to our new findability heading. And we relabeled based on that. I do want to point out that even though we did that and I just now made it sound easy, it wasn't. It was still cataloging every title in our system. We just tried to take a pretty laid back approach to it. And we made peace with the fact that it was not going to be perfect on the first try. And we wanted to be really open with our library staff about that. And we just said, all right, I know you're going to find things that you want to move to a different section. And you might be totally right. We are very likely to take your suggestion because we looked at it on the catalog. You're looking at the book in your hand. We understand that's a different level of familiarity with it. But we had to tell them, just let the dust settle first and then request those changes. And they did. And they requested the changes. And we made many, many of the changes they requested.
So I know that this was a process. I believe when we spoke before, this was like a year that you all talked about. What can you say about this 5 years later? What pros, cons, anything you learned?
Well, first of all, I'm just realizing it's been 5 years, and that kind of blew my brain a little bit there for a second. What is time?
Or patron response, whether at the beginning of this process or now, is there a difference?
I think that we really over-prepared for customer blowback that didn't really happen. They were just still finding their books. It might have been a little bit easier, but who's going to complain about it being easier?
I'm wondering about things that other school librarians and public librarians might be thinking about, and that's how long did you have to shut down to physically move and label all the books? Because people are trying to think of this logistically as they're listening to this episode, and they want to know, how can I actually do this? So can you explain that?
Yeah. So we sort of had different phases. We started with some of our really small sections, like our nonfiction audiobooks that were not very big. And we did that while we were open. So, in most branches, that wasn't too many. So that wasn't too difficult to do. Pull everything off onto a cart, relabel it real quick and put it back. Pretty minimal disruption. So that kind of helped us also get used to our process and our flow. And we did find some mistakes and some things that we were like, that was way too difficult. We need to change that process. So I would highly recommend starting small before you just dive into your largest sections. But we actually did the adult nonfiction collection during a 3-day closure. So we closed all 15 of our branches for 3 days in a row. And every book off the shelf, we had every cart full, books all over tables, books stacked up on floors, just books everywhere. We had a lot of our headquarters and admin staff all went to branches to help, in addition to the branch staff that were doing this. So that was done over 3 days, the entire adult nonfiction collection. And then when we opened back up, we worked on our kids' nonfiction. And that was sort of done just in smaller pieces, just sending like, okay, here's one heading that gets sent out to all the branches. Everybody, this week, you're going to do all the animal books. And so they would do all the animal books. And, that was a little messy because we'd have to just kind of have books sitting around. Because obviously, as you pull books off and relabel, something that was at maybe the end of Dewey is now at the beginning of Findability. And it doesn't fit on the shelf yet because there's no space. So, I think our branches did a really good job of just finding places to put stuff, putting carts around on the floor that just held the books until they could move stuff. I know some branches just shifted books constantly for like a month. And so, bless them because that was a lot of work.
So I would imagine you had, if you're a working library, like the people that are listening, your library is always open. So people had books checked out that you weren't able to label. So how do you manage the one-offs, the new books, the things you purchase as things come back? How did you manage that? Because then you're not in your workflow of doing just that.
We used lots of reports based on the item records that I talked about earlier. They printed many labels at the branch, but we pre-printed as many as we could and sent them to the branch along with the shelf list of what they had checked in at that branch at that moment. And everything that was checked out got an alert note on the item records so that when they got it in the book drop and scanned it in, a note would pop up saying what kind of label to put on it. And I know no one likes check-in notes, but we relied on that to get things relabeled at the branch. That's how we handled the one-off. That also allowed us to pre-print the labels in the order of the Dewey shelf list. So we had to run the reports, make the item record changes, print the labels, send it all as one package.
So another component whenever you change something, especially when you have your regular customers, then you have people that probably just come in occasionally. How do you communicate that there's a new way of finding things? Or is it so easy that with the book browsing model, they can find things on their own without any explanation?
Well, we did a little bit ahead of time before we made the changes. We encouraged staff to talk to especially their regulars that, hey, this change is coming. We're still going to be here to help you. You can always talk to a staff member if you can't find what used to be on aisle 3 and is now on a totally different aisle. So we did try to give people a little bit of a heads up. And then, of course, the first day after we reopened, we just made sure that we had lots of staff out on the floor of all the branches that could really help direct people. I think the signage helped a lot to kind of make some of it intuitive for particularly the larger categories that people would frequently come in for, because they just walk in and see a big sign that now says cooking or biography. And they're like, oh, that's my section. I didn't even need to think real hard about that. Some of the more nitty gritty was maybe needed a little bit of help with a staff member sort of explaining the change. And of course, some people, customers, even if they were happy with the change, still sometimes wanted to know, why did you do this? That kind of thing. And so just talking to customers, we had sort of provided some talking points to staff about, why we did this, how to explain it to customers to give them a starting point so they would feel comfortable. And then, I would actually say that people who don't visit the library very often, people who only come in every couple of weeks or every couple of months, I'm not even sure if they realize that we changed things. I think they just walked in and just saw a sign and went right for it, or they just went straight to a librarian and just asked for help like they might have normally done.
I remember, Jenny, that you said that findability isn't necessarily easier. It isn't necessarily harder. It's just different.
Because classification is classification. I talk with catalogers here all the time, as much as I did when we were using Dewey, about things that sort of fit in two places. And I like to use the example of transportation just as a topic, because we think, oh yeah, 620s, but there were also books about cars and vehicles and transportation, and I think the 350s and the 380s. But just bringing those things together under a heading for transportation gave us a place to put those and just have one place to bring them together. And it's like Alex, I was one day out in a branch and I was helping them relabel their picture book nonfiction. And I just happened to be in the transportation section, just putting them on the shelf. I had just put really lovely spine labels on them and all the tape, and I was putting them on there. And someone walked over with his young child and he said, "Where are the truck books?" I'm right here. But after they left, I realized that they had absolutely done a catalog search. We've been trying to get people to use the online catalog for 30 years, and he did it. But that transportation heading was not in the search results. And so that told me that we had to make a modification to how we used our online catalog to make that show up in the search results, to tell people where to go. So we were able to tie that in as well. So we had not only the signage, the spine labels, but then we had a call number show up in our search results on the catalog.
Well, so you're still learning. You still make those changes. And for school librarians, and when they go to the public library or when you go to a bookstore, the skill set is, can I walk into any library, bookstore, or even college? I left that out. Can I figure out the system.
I really think it's important to point out that you guys did not do this on your own. And as you mentioned, as you were going, it was a collaborative group. And I think that's important. Some school librarians that are out there would like to jump in and do this on their own, but it's a huge task. And just to have the conversations about what's appropriate for categories is daunting. And people have different viewpoints. And it's important to hear all those because you're going to have different types of patrons you're dealing with and serving. You want to make sure you're meeting all their needs because the goal is for them to be able to find what they're looking for in a logical way, right?
It is. And I would say to anyone who is thinking about using a word-based classification, or if they want to think about genreifying their nonfiction, I think is how people talk about it sometimes, to really look at the collection and not try to use every single BISAC heading or every single heading that you see in another word-based classification for that collection. It really needs to be customized to your collection. Otherwise, you might as well just stick with Dewey, something that is kind of all-purpose for every library. And I think that's where the strength of this classification system that we're using comes in, because we looked at our collection. And as we buy new books and we fit them into those categories, if we find that, wow, we are cataloging a lot of books on artificial intelligence, can we have a subheading under technology? Yes. Thank you, cataloger Stacy. You know who you are for that suggestion.
The reason we do this is for our patrons. That is why we do it. We don't not do things because it's hard or difficult. But Alex, do you have any recommendations or a lasting thing that you would like to say about this process?
I think just really listening to as many people as possible when it comes to figuring out how to categorize everything, and not just catalogers themselves, because while they obviously have a very deep understanding of Dewey and the collection, they're going to see things very differently than maybe regular staff that are speaking with the customers. I know that we had a few things where we had staff say, hey, customers ask about this topic all the time, and you guys didn't make a topic for it. Actually, I think one of them might have been for writing. We had just grouped all the writing books in with just like media and arts, but they weren't clearly set all together. And a staff member had let us know, like, we get questions because people are trying to write their own novel and they're students who are trying to improve their writing. And it just had never occurred to us, oh, we should have a subheading for writing and actually pull that section out, because we, back in materials, back in staff engagement and marketing, all those different admin side of things, we just didn't know that that's what customers were asking for. So it's helpful to take in all those opinions from people that are interacting in different parts of your library, because they all are going to bring a different perspective to what is going to be most important. That's really important to narrow down what you're trying to label everything as.
I think that's excellent advice. And this was so great meeting with you guys. We hear all the time from school librarians about wanting to make changes in their nonfiction sections. And the advice you've given today is really going to help a lot of folks out there figure out how to do that. So thanks again for being here today, and good luck with the rest of your revamping of your findability as you continue to evolve year after year.
Yes, thank you. You guys have great examples of how to increase engagement with your community. So thank you.
Another great discussion, this time with Jenny and Alex from the Public Library System in Gwinnett County, to talk about word-based classification for nonfiction. Jan, we exchanged ideas during the interview. It's now time for our recap. Why don't you start us off?
Thanks, Julie. I think it's important for us to talk about why we wanted to record an episode about findability. Some call it Dewey Light or even ditching Dewey. But listeners, there is a lot of research in journal articles and online discussion about the flaws with Dewey, and we encourage you to look it up. But this episode is meant to highlight, again, that libraries are dynamic and are constantly evolving to meet the needs of students, well, all patrons, really. Libraries are hubs. Libraries foster learning, creativity, and connection.
I'm glad you just mentioned connection, because the goal of findability is to make materials more accessible. Jenny emphasized that classification is still classification, whether using Dewey or findability. Findability brings together related topics under single headings which makes it easier for patrons to find what they are looking for.
Wait, we want our patrons to find what they're looking for? Is my sarcasm starting to show, Julie?
A little.
A little. What I like is that findability is such a positive term. It's like encouraging students and patrons. You can do this. You can find what you're looking for. And guess what? You may even find something you weren't looking for.
Jan's getting fired up. Alex spoke about the importance of creating consistent and user-friendly signage. They finalized their categories and then designed the signs. I think trying to stay consistent as a school district is also helpful, especially when you have questions from patrons about the why behind categories that are created. Make sure you limit the number of main categories to avoid confusion. We've seen some nonfiction sections with 50 or more categories, and we believe that 30 or fewer is a good goal, and then allow the creativity to exist when creating subcategories within the 30 main ones.
Good idea. Start with the end in mind. That's a great tip. It's kind of like when our students are spending more time choosing their slide deck theme than thinking about the content.
So large signs were placed at the top of bookshelves. They posted signs on end caps and had divider signs between the books on the shelves. Currently, there are 10 schools in our district who have moved to the Findability model, and we have at least 10 more ready for this transformation. When schools have completed this, we encourage them to celebrate with a grand reopening. Hold a faculty meeting in the space to showcase it. The students are always excited. Let's get our staff on board too. Brand your library.
Yes. So Julie, this reminds me of when school libraries began to shelve fiction by genre. And in the library, we began to see our frequent library students easily find read-alikes.
I love that word. I love that.
Oh, yeah. They knew their preferred genres, and suddenly they had so many more titles to choose from. But more importantly, we began to see students who didn't log on to use the online catalog for whatever reason, but those students gained confidence in finding books they wanted to read. Gone was the need to know a specific author. And I know that those students were thinking, hey, I know that I enjoy mystery fiction, or I'm interested in historical fiction. I'm going to go to that section to browse.
So I think we've learned today that findability will have positive benefits in schools, not just for the students, but for school librarians. It'll give you a new perspective on your collection's strengths and weaknesses with the physical arrangement of the collection, and will also show you the areas of high demand and areas to be promoted.
Ooh, I like the word positive benefit in libraries together.
Me too.
Julie, that's a wrap.
Make sure to visit our website at www.libraryexchangepodcast.com.
You'll find episode notes and links. You can even submit your questions or inspiring stories that may be featured on the podcast.
If you're looking for some swag for your library or book-loving friends, visit libraryexchange.etsy.com.
That's a lot of URLs, so I'm glad you had to say all of that, Julie.
Thanks for joining us. We can't wait to have you back for our next episode of Library Exchange.